Hey everyone, and welcome as we continue our study through the Gospels, looking at the 250 events in the life of Jesus. And today we are looking at Jesus stating that he is eternal. And this is going to come from John 8:48 through 59. And if you've been following us along, especially this week, and then really most of last week too, you've seen this confrontation with Jesus and the religious leaders. He's been in the temple speaking. And like we talked about earlier, this is kind of his, this is the push up to a real confrontation with the Jewish leaders and kind of going into the heart of Jerusalem, into the temple, and really, having a full confrontation. And this is kind of the turning point towards, him pointing towards his crucifixion. And so he's been going back and forth with him over the last couple of days, right? He talked about how he was the light of the world. He warns of the coming judgment, and then he looks at, he speaks about who his true children are, who his true followers are. And then today he states that he is that he's eternal. And so verse 47 of yesterday's, it says, anyone who belongs listens gladly to the words of God, but you don't listen because you don't belong to God. So he's telling these people that they do not belong to God because of the way they're behaving. So we pick up here in verse 48, and this one's a little longer, but I am going to go through this one because this interaction right here at the end of this is very important. And so the people, they respond to Jesus. They call him a Samaritan devil. Didn't we say all along that you were possessed by a demon? So again, they're like, you're a devil. You're possessed by the demon because of the things that you're saying. And Jesus says, no, I have no demon in me, for I honor my Father, and you dishonor me. Um, and though I wish, and though I have no wish to glorify myself, God is going to glorify me. He is the true judge. I tell you the truth. Anyone who obeys my teaching will never die. And so again, they scoff at him again. The people said that now we know you were possessed by a demon. Even Abraham and the prophets died, but you say anyone who obeys my teaching will never die. Are you greater than our father Abraham? He died, and so did the prophets. Who do you think you are? Again, they don't understand what he's talking about from a spiritual point. So he goes a little bit further, and he says, "If I want to glorify myself, it doesn't count. But if it's my Father who will it is my Father who will glorify me. You say he is our God, but you don't even know him. I know him. If I said otherwise, I would be as great as a liar as you." So he's calling them liars. He's telling them they're not of God. But I do know him and obey him. Your father Abraham rejoiced, and he looked forward to my coming. And this is where he really he digs into them. He says, your father Abraham rejoiced as he looked forward to my coming. He saw it and was glad. The people said, you aren't even 50 years old. How can you say you have seen Abraham? And this is probably one of the most um, important things that Jesus claimed right here whenever he was speaking to them. Definitely the most controversial that he ever had. And Jesus said to him, I tell you the truth, before Abraham was even born, I am. Now, if you're thinking, well, that's, he didn't even really say anything. He said a ton in these two words, right? If we go back to Exodus, right, when he we look at this, we go back to Exodus and we look at what Jesus is talking about here. When God said, when he was asked, what am I to tell people who you are? What's your name? And he just tell them I am. And he says, I am who I am. Right. And so when Jesus said this, right, I tell you the truth, before Abraham was born, I am, he was claiming to be God, right? He was claiming to be God and the same as God. And it's verse 59 says, at this point they picked up stones to throw at him because of this was pure blasphemy. He was basically saying, I am God, by saying what he said there. So if anyone ever tells you Jesus never said that he was God, take them to John 8, verse 58, and show them this verse. That's exactly what he was saying with this verse. At this point, they picked up stones to throw at him, but Jesus was hidden from them and left the temple. Again, it wasn't his time. And so this is where he bowed out. He's like, they're not going to kill me here. And so he just was hidden from them. They couldn't see him anymore for however he did it. I don't know if he went invisible, if they just couldn't recognize him, what he did. I mean, it doesn't say. But he left the temple. He used whatever powers he had to make sure that he couldn't be seen, and he left the temple. And so if we go back and look at the notes on this, right? If we look at what when Jesus starts this out, when Jesus says those who obey him won't die, he was talking about a spiritual death, and they didn't understand it. They thought he was talking physically, that they wouldn't physically die, and that's not right. That's not what he was talking about. But he was talking about the fact that even in physical death, we're going to overcome, right, the sins of the world, and through Jesus. That's the only way we can do that. those who follow Christ will be eventually raised eternally with him. When he comes back, we're going to be raised with him. And so God told Abraham, right, the father of the Jewish nation, if you understand the Jewish history and go back, Abraham was the father of the Jewish nation. That and God told him that through him all nations would be blessed. You can find this in Genesis 12 and Genesis 15. And Abraham had been able to see through his eyes of faith, right? He didn't see all this happen, but he had faith in Jesus or in God that this was happening, and so he believed him. Right? Jesus was a descendant of Abraham, and so he blessed all the people through his death, resurrection, and offer of salvation. Right? And so we talked about this, that all that the entire world would be blessed through the descendants of Abraham. That's what he was talking about. He was talking about eventually Jesus coming along. And so if we look at this last statement, right, this is one of the most powerful statements ever uttered by Jesus. And like I said, if anyone ever says that Jesus never claimed to be God, all you've got to do is take them to John 8:58. Now, a lot of people will say, well, God, they'll say Jesus never uttered the words "I am God." No, he never said "I am God," right? Because he didn't speak English, and so, but he used the exact, when God was asked in Exodus, Exodus 3 verse 14, when he was asked this, right, his name and who to say he is, he says "I am," right, and that was the language that he used here. And so Jesus is using that exact same language. That's why the Pharisees and those picked up stones to throw at him and kill him, because they knew what he was saying. Right, he was saying in English, how we would say it now, he was saying, "I am God." Right, and so not only we see here, not only did Jesus say that he existed before Abraham, he undeniably he was proclaiming his divinity, but he also applied God's holy name to him, to himself when he did this. And that claim demanded a response from the people. They had to respond. It couldn't be ignored by them. Right? It was blasphemy to claim to be God, especially when you weren't. And so obviously it wasn't blasphemy for Jesus because he was God. And so this is why they tried to stone him, because he was claiming to be equal, if not God himself. And so in accordance with the law, we see this law in Leviticus 24:16. They were going to stone him. That was the law. That was what they were supposed to do. They were so angry by what he claimed to be that they were going to stone him. And so they they well understood what Jesus was claiming here. And because they didn't believe him, right? They did not believe him. They charged him with blasphemy and they were going to kill him. And so we see God, however he hides himself from the people and he leaves the temple. And so this is kind of the final, confrontation and stuff that we see here in this particular lesson and this series of lessons and messages that we have here with Jesus teaching in the temple. And so he goes and he just escalates it. Now, he wasn't doing it to just be mean to cause problems, but he was trying to show the people who he was, and he was teaching the truth of who he was. And by doing that, right, he full on confronted with especially the Pharisees and the religious leaders of the day, because he was claiming to be who he was. He was showing them who he was. And so this is where it really escalates up to his crucifixion. We're going to see this slowly build over time, where they continue to try to go after him. And so Jesus leaves the temple, and then we're going to pick up later on tomorrow, where Jesus starts sending out his, from this point on now, he starts sending out his disciples and his apostles to teach and preach and spread his message. So it's really starting to reach a pivotal point here, where it's, his ministry is going into full force. Before, he was just teaching his followers, they followed him, and he was working with them, teaching them. And now he's going out and sending them out 100% full speed ahead to really spread his message and spread his gospel. So just to summarize this, right, Jesus is claiming that he is eternal. Jesus is showing that he is God. He's claiming to be God when he uses the term "I am." And if you go back through this whole chapter of 7 and 8, he uses "I am" statements several times, but he doesn't come out and say it fully. It's like a hint, but then he finally at the end of this says "I am." Right? He uses that fully when he says "I am" and claiming to be God. And so We have to recognize that Jesus is eternal. He is who he says he is, and he is God, and he's the Son of God. So, that's where the Trinity comes in, and we will dive deeper into that. I don't have time to go into it full detail here, but that's where the Trinity comes in, and we look at all that. So, as always, I appreciate everyone for watching. If you haven't taken the time to subscribe to our channel, please go ahead and do so. We're going to continue to put out daily devotions, and then later on we're going to dive into some deeper, harder subjects and look at some things that we just kind of struggle with in our daily lives. As always, I appreciate everyone for watching.